Welcome, comrades. We're in the People's Hall, and you're listening to The Party Line. It's a podcast from The Ditch on theditch.com. I'm Harry Browne. You can follow The Party Line wherever you get your podcasts, and you should be already following The Ditch on all your apps. The podcast has emerged from the bunker downstairs. That's the Rosa Luxemburg studio, and we're upstairs among friends as well as comrades in a crowded People's Hall on the first floor of the Whistleblower building in the Dublin city centre. For the second week in a row on the podcast, we're missing the usual co-host, that's Niamh Ní, for the very good reason that she's in Cuba. And today is the day of a large international solidarity mobilization in Cuba. Niamh is part of that, and you'll be able to hear back from Niamh in the coming weeks reporting on her experience on that. She didn't actually flotilla in, she flew in with 2 suitcases full of medical supplies, but she'll tell you more when she's back on the show. And all of us are here enjoying the launch of these premises, and Eoghan will tell us a bit more about that in a minute. Joining us is Eoghan McNeill from The Ditch. Welcome, Eoghan. How are you keeping? And our very specialist guest today is a great Palestinian photojournalist, winner of many prizes, published in many, many publications, but also a blogger and a podcaster to an equally high standard, and we'll talk about that in a minute too. Now our friend and comrade here in Ireland, and we're very lucky to have her here, Eman Mohammed.
Thank you for having me. Eid Mubarak.
And I think you're eating again and very happy.
Very happy to be reunited with food, yes.
That's great. Before Eoghan tells us what we're doing here and what The Ditch is doing as well, maybe, Eman, you would kind of launch us into a discussion about The Ditch. What does The Ditch mean to you?
So when I stumbled on The Ditch, like literally, I was still in Washington, D.C. I was still based there, and I was plotting my escape to Ireland. And the genocide started, so the focus on the media role started to intensify. For me, as a Palestinian and a journalist, I saw an investigation that was done by The Ditch, and it was around the same time that a lot of my colleagues, Westerners, and back in Gaza, Palestinian journalists, we were talking about how our journalism world is collapsing in a sense, and that every morality that we've ever boosted about is kind of fizzling away, and it rings hollow to what is happening because the genocide started, and with that, we started to see very clearly the manufacturing of the consent for the genocide in Western media, in the headlines. And I started to hear more of my colleagues who I enjoyed working with say that these are the very last years of their commitment to journalism, because if you can't do what you really intended to do as a journalist, to report morally and to push for accountability, what good is that? And that's when I first time got introduced to The Ditch, and it was like a moment of fresh air that I felt like I'm not the only one, but also that it was kind of a soothing and comforting feeling to know, after monitoring Irish media and their role in following the complicity and keeping track of what U.S. and other Western media publications had been doing, and the lack of solidarity that we felt as Palestinian journalists, where we weren't even being mentioned. There was no tributes, no coverage of hundreds of my colleagues getting killed. And I just felt like it's not an independent source of news, but it's also such a small team that is pushing for accountability and causing like around the world consequences, which is exactly what you want to see in journalism. It's almost like seeing the cool kids minus the mean people, and knowing that you wanna know more.
Let's talk to one of the cool kids.
You're welcome.
Thank you so much.
As Eman said, small team, 3 of you.
Over the course of the 5 years at The Ditch, we like to say that we all have our own personal politics. We're a Republican publication. We're a left populist publication. And we like to challenge power. Over the course of the 5 years, we went after Bord Planala. We've done a lot of reporting about Children's Health Ireland. We go after Fianna Fáil and Fine Gael politicians who've done dodgy property deals. And then over the last 2 years, a large part of our focus has been reporting on Irish complicity in genocide, which even when a man was saying, when the genocide happened, right? Or when it began, something that was incredibly stark to me last week in particular. People like Micheál Martin, Simon Harris, and a lot of the mainstream press, they consider themselves to be great for using that word now. And then, we could do a whole podcast about all the reasons why Micheál Martin shouldn't have gone to DC, but one of them is that if you truly believe it is a genocide, what are you doing going over there and presenting a bowl of shamrocks to an equal partner in that genocide? So that's what we've tried to do over the last 2 years is report on Irish complicity, acknowledging that this is a genocide. Not just using the word, but actually trying our best to report accurately on what that means for the Irish Free State.
And I think, the audience that you've developed, we've got about 35 people in this room and, probably twice that number again elsewhere in the building at the moment. People, really appreciate what the does. There's no question about that. Tell us why you brought us here today.
It's just, it's a great day. Thank you all so much for coming. One of my favorite songs of all time, Jay-Z says in the first few lines of Izzo, he says, "You could have been anywhere in the world, but you're here with me," and I appreciate that. Let's rock. Thank you so much for coming, guys. We're here in the Whistleblower, this amazing new bookshop that we hope is going to be a great amenity for the left. And when we say the left, similar to how I talked about the Ditch, we all have our own personal politics. We're a broad left publication. And it's great to see so many shades and stripes of the left here today. We've got Trots, Tankies, some Labour Party,
No,
Labour Party are here, And, I was talking to, I was talking to great writer Aoife Kilban McGowan, who Substacks, and she is going to be contributing a chapter to a little book that we're putting together about the story of the Connolly campaign. And something I was talking about with Aoife was, I unfortunately didn't get a chance to go, but I do remember that gig for Catherine Connolly in Vicar Street. Yeah. And I thought that was just so cool because in a very, very simple, it was a cool night and it was for the left. And I think it'd be great if we could have more nights, events, days like that. And hopefully the Whistleblower, along with however we can help and support, hopefully we're going to have a real fun time.
There was definitely no false objectivity about the presidential campaign in the Ditch, it must be said. I think it was the media wing of the Connolly campaign, really, wasn't it? Or in any case, let's talk about the mainstream media a little bit. We have a kind of... No, sorry, before we do that, tell me about one story that's in the Ditch at the moment. Because there's a crowd here that I think would really appreciate this latest piece that you guys have published in the last day or two.
Yeah, so my colleague Roman had done a little bit of digging and he got a story that had a personal place in my heart as well. Being from the Northwest, a place called Ballyshannon, which is on the border with Sligo there. We often walk the family dog over in Mullaghmore, which is home to Classybawn Castle, which is the former home of Lord Mountbatten. Roman did a bit of digging and he was able to find out that, we were talking about this earlier, how we headlined it, the former chair of the RTE board spent 3 weeks at Mountbatten's castle. And as Harry was saying, why didn't you put Eamon Andrews' name in the headline?
Because nobody under 50 realizes that Eamon Andrews is like the biggest name in Irish media.
But I was actually on the train And I was working on the laptop on it, and just as we were about to publish, I went into my family WhatsApp group, and I was like, what do we think about Eamon Andrews? And then my mum was like, why? And I was like, oh, I spent 3 weeks in Mountbatten's castle. Like, you know, and I sent on the headline, and then my mum's reaction was, oh no, everyone loves Eamon Andrews.
Yeah, this could be the final cancellation of the Ditch. Doing exposés on Eamon Andrews. You've lost the last of your over 50 audience with that one, all right. Let's talk a little non-Ditch media, though. A few weeks ago, I was at a party in Donegal, and a tennis player said, you know what would be really good to have on a podcast? It'd be if we had some critiques of the media. You know, it needs to be more of that. And so the NDM, the non-Ditch media, is going to be a focus of a segment every week on our podcast. And this week, we decided to go all the way to the top and have a go at Fintan O'Toole. So Fintan O'Toole, people in the room would be familiar with, longtime pundit here, best-selling author, obviously Irish Times journalist for a long time, and obviously someone that people on the left have mixed feelings about and have often appreciated his work as well as sometimes been frustrated by it. What not everybody knows, perhaps, here is that Fintan O'Toole regularly writes for the New York Review of Books, a series of essays that appear there that I think could be collected under the title "Trump is Bad, Actually." And his latest "Trump is Bad, Actually" piece in the New York Review of Books relates to the Iran war, headlined "Signifying Absolutely Nothing." And I thought we might talk about that, not to have a go at Fintan O'Toole personally, but to talk about maybe the limits of a kind of a liberal critique and a personalized critique of empire and the politics of the American war in the Middle East at the moment. Of course, Fintan O'Toole also recently was essentially the presenter of Obama's big show down at the 3 Arena a few months ago. So that kind of locates him politically in American politics. So look, this piece, Signifying Absolutely Nothing, in the New York Review of Books, we'll put a link to it in the show notes. Not a bad piece of writing by any means, just one that is trapped in this ongoing narrative about the deep and terrible abnormality of Donald Trump. Donald Trump is deeply and terribly abnormal, it has to be said, and those of us on the left are long time trying to figure out exactly what the nature of the aberration is. But in the course of this article, Fintan O'Toole literally seems to rationalize all previous instantiations of US imperialism. More or less, well, at least former presidents, the other presidents had a logic about them. There was a meaning to their imperialism, whereas Trump, we're told in this piece, he's just meaningless. It's all futility. It signifies absolutely nothing. And it's typified, I think, in the way that Fintan writes about the announcement of the war, that Trump did the little video in the baseball cap at the White House. Or was it at Mar-a-Lago even? It was at Mar-a-Lago, I beg your pardon. And Fintan is deeply aesthetically disappointed in this announcement. Such announcements have an established visual language of solemnity and moral magnitude. The live address to the nation and the world from the White House, the rows of five-star generals in the Situation Room, the military briefings, the sense of historic moment. Whereas the casual nature of the declaration of war matched the unmoored nature of Trump's imperial cosplay. So this is the basic narrative here is that Trump is a disappointment when you're used to the proper trappings of empire. What did you make of this piece, guys?
I can't, with a straight face, talk about this while being a Palestinian and surrounded by Lebanese and Iranian friends who are bleeding family members and not feel my blood boiling. You can never talk about a war, an unlawful war, and then make it so theatrical and be genuine when you describe the human loss and the casualties. And his ability to use every poetic reference that he could made me feel like this is not a piece of journalism. This is a theater, and we're just part of it. And they use our suffering and misery as a hit piece or something that you can keep the paycheck coming. This is literally what every journalist should not be, and in my understanding of what journalism is. It was very sad that he reflected on Trump's unhinged foreign policy as it's Trump's and not the U.S. foreign policy that had been going on for years, which is not surprising that he was rubbing shoulders and best buddies with Obama, since to him that's not a war criminal. You're only a war criminal when you announce war from the Mar-a-Lago, but if you do it and execute American citizens and children in Yemen, that's fine. It's okay. Then we're going to host you and be happy about it.
Yeah, I mean, first of all, as you referred to, it was about the aesthetics of it, and it was, written that, some parts of it were vaguely Barthian, but without name-checking Barth, but without, he didn't particularly go beyond, at least with someone like Barth, aesthetics do signify an actual material politics, whereas this was purely aesthetic, would be the first thing. The second thing, the general thrust of the whole piece was that, Trump is this aberration that I don't understand. Now, as you've said, certainly, Trump 1.0, some analyses would have called him a fascist. Some people held out first time around. I think that there are more analyses on the left going towards that analysis now. Right. And maybe he is an aberration in that way. Mm-hmm. But certainly, to bring it back to empire, one way, maybe Fintan mightn't have been as bemused by the war announcement and the actual war itself if he introduced Israel into his analysis a little bit more.
Well, it's interesting that you say that, because those of us in the Palestinian movement know that Fintan has not necessarily been a friend to that movement over the years, but he is relatively, by Fintan's standards, hard on Israel in this piece, but he uses the name Netanyahu more often than he uses the word Israel. So a little bit like Trump is an aberration, Netanyahu is sort of presented as an exceptional figure. The article leans, in fact, quite hard into the idea that Trump has ceded to Netanyahu the running of this war, that Netanyahu is the only one with a narrative, to go back to the aesthetic. Netanyahu is the only one with a sort of a viable narrative of this war, and Trump has failed in that respect. Again, this is not a kind of necessarily Fintan endorsing any theory about Israel running the American government. It's simply that Trump is so unsuited that he's allowed this other sort of gang boss to push him around and to run the war on his behalf. Usually, he says, a president going to war is taking on burdens, and again, this kind of heroic narrative of presidents who take on burdens when they go to war. Trump is shrugging them off. There's an interesting contrast, and very much in light of what Eoghan was saying, the recent piece, Homeland Empire in Equator magazine by Nikhil Pal Singh, which I definitely recommend that people read. And Singh quotes Henry Kissinger in one of his last interviews, certainly not a friend to people in this room, but Kissinger, an astute enough observer on this kind of statecraft. Kissinger described Trump as the type of person who emerges at the end of a dying age to force it to give up its old pretenses. And maybe that's the beginning of kind of getting to grips with what it is that is actually exceptional about Trump. It's the empire giving up its old liberal pretenses. And I have to say one other thing about this article, that the idea that America doesn't have a narrative for a war with Iran is really kind of strange, given that, the U.S. ran its first coup in Iran about 73 years ago, was obviously caught up in the Iranian Revolution to the extent that it sent a failed rescue mission in to take people out of the embassy. It funded Iraq's war on Iran in the 1980s. So there is a long history of the United States at war with Iran. And one other thing in terms of this history of U.S.-Iranian relations, there are also, and again, those of us who are old enough to remember Eamon Andrews are definitely old enough to remember George W. Bush. And You could walk into a bookshop, and it didn't have to be a left-wing bookshop like the one downstairs, and there's a whole wall or a table full of books about George W. Bush and his stupidity, his unsuitableness, his inarticulacy, his stupid war. You know, that we've done this before, and it's terrible that Fintan O'Toole forgets, because if the likes of Fintan O'Toole forgets, we all forget the nature of the imperial beast and what we're up against, even while accepting, as Eoghan suggests, that there is also something that needs to be understood about the Trump difference. So do you have anything else you want to say about that? I have to say, Eman locating Fintan O'Toole's writing in terms of theatre is very astute for someone that doesn't remember Fintan O'Toole writing a lot about theatre over the years, a theatre critic of a very high standard. So I think that's very helpful, Eman, and thank you, both of you, for helping us with the media, the non-Ditch media section of the program. Sorry, just one other thing about this piece. Words that are not in this article. Palestine. The word Palestine is not in this article. The word Lebanon is not in this article. The word genocide is not in this article. The word Biden is not in this article. And it's a long article. The word Gaza is here once, and it's just by way of saying what an air war directed by Netanyahu could look like in Iran, and of course it does look like in Gaza and in Lebanon today. Eman, you left Gaza in 2014 with a baby who was injured in the Obama-era war on your home place. Joe Biden's genocide has come to define the threat to your relatives that are still in Gaza today. How have you seen what is essentially the expansion of the Gaza genocide into a war again in Lebanon and in Iran as well, and also acting as a cover for more killing in Gaza, more murder and ethnic cleansing in the West Bank as well?
So the thing is, I don't measure my family's safety by who's sitting in the White House. And I have not done that as a Palestinian for the longest, because no US president was ever a friend of a free Palestine and full human rights for Palestinians to begin with. I know that it looks for Western media and maybe sometimes for Western audience like it's an expansion, like the war is spreading to bring in more and more countries affected by the US and Israeli unhinged genocidal wars. However, I would beg to differ, because to us it just seems to be more of an exposure rather than an expansion. Like, a lot of people think that Iran started suffering just 3 weeks ago when the US and Israel started killing civilians, but it's almost like it's discounting the sanctions that made life so miserable and so much harder and sometimes impossible for a lot of Iranian women that the West likes to talk about quite a lot, and Iranian children and Iranian people altogether. Same with Lebanon. I know that it looks like it went back again to Lebanon, but I don't think it ever stopped. And if we ask any Lebanese citizen, they will tell you that they've never felt like they were at the times of peace. We're not even talking justice. I think when I left, it was Obama's administration, and before I even talk or cover anything broad and touches on different countries in the world, when we evacuated, my daughter was 1 year old, and she was injured, and she was a U.S. citizen. She was not a dual citizen. She was a U.S. citizen only, and that was on purpose to provide her with whatever protection I couldn't have. And that was a big mistake, because the U.S. Embassy simply said to her evacuation, we're not going to do it, not because we can't, but because you chose to go to Palestine. And it was very petty kind of response. And that delayed her evacuation by 3 weeks, which she had internal bleeding. And in case of internal bleeding, people would understand how crucial the 3 weeks would be. she's 13 years old now, and we just revisited hospitals after 7 years of her first years were spent in hospitals, and we thought we're done, and now we're back to a more privileged level of suffering. And I resent that. I hate that so much, because every time I hear someone talking about, from my US friends or US journalists, about the good times of Obama, where fascism was not a thing, it doesn't take me a second to think of my own family, where their slaughter was very much permitted during the Obama administration. So I don't honestly think that any US president cared ever about the lives of brown and black children in the global south or elsewhere, and that's not changing. It just, we're using Netanyahu and we're using Trump as, I hate to say scapegoat, because they are not innocent whatsoever, but they are like they are becoming like the face of all this evilness, while there is no support for them, as if there's no Congress backing this, as if all the permission to go that far just happened overnight, and it's like a coup happening in the U.S. And for that, let's just go and free the U.S. if they're that much under duress and in need of liberation.
Right. Okay. I think we have a plan.
Yes. Yeah, we do.
Although, speaking as an American, I think that just because there's a terrible, terrible regime in Washington that brutalizes its own people, that's no excuse for someone to come in with bombs to try to change it. No, I have to say that, but but I wouldn't necessarily oppose it all the way. What do you reckon?
Yeah, I mean, I think back to, I was in UCD around the time when Obama was first elected, and I actually remember Michael McNeill was an old lecturer. He was a guest lecturer, and I remember Michael, in one of the guest lectures speaking about, how excited he was to hopefully go home that night and see Barack Obama get elected, right? And to be fair, I remember that time as well, and people on the left felt the same way, people I know who have gone on to be now very much on the far left or the hard left or whatever scare word that you want to use, felt the same way. Like there was a feeling that this would be different, right? And the preceding decades have shown us that no, that is very much not the case.
Yeah, I have to admit, I think there was an element of whatever this guy turns out to be, the fact that the American people saw fit to elect him with his name and with his race, that must be some symbol of some new space that had opened up in American consciousness. But maybe that was very, very naive of me. Iman is looking at me like, oh, you poor baby, you poor stupid.
You should not talk to us. Yeah. We would tell you.
Now listen, one of the great things about talking to Eman is that she doesn't pull any punches whatsoever. She will tell you what she thinks of what you're saying, but also a kind of a window into the diversity of Palestinian life, Palestinian politics, the Palestinian character that we sometimes sort of have a tendency to reduce a little bit. That we, even while obviously being the people in this room, I know deeply in solidarity with the people of Palestine, you don't want to be just a suffering people with the world sympathizing with you.
Because I don't think we are. I think people were introduced due to this genocide, this escalation in genocide, to a lot of our suffering, but they haven't been equally invested or even introduced to a lot of our life and our lifestyle and our diversity and who we are really. And for you to be a true comrade in solidarity with any people, you have to know who they are, what they stand for. When it's not just death or life, it's also human rights throughout that life. And it's very similar to what we're seeing in Lebanon. It's very similar to what we're seeing in Iran. The world had been conditioned to think that they are just suffering, and this is just a little bit more suffering. So if it's working as desensitizing, because it is, and it's meant to desensitize you, when you see thousands of Palestinian children being killed, and then you don't know anything about our dysfunctional habits or traditions, or the fact that if we fast for 30 days, we can still be like non-religious, and it just doesn't embody our culture so much. Anytime that anyone hears that I was raised in a convent, they automatically raise their eyebrows, like, oh, you exist? Like, Palestinian Christians also exist, and my name is Mohammed because I am a Muslim, but like, we're just such a small community that we're all blended in one way or another, and we just have so much more than dead bodies in bags, and that's so dehumanizing that just me talking about it makes me feel less than, because you almost have to prove that you're real and you're not an alien from Mars, while looking at everyone else and thinking like, are you sane? Like, there's definitely much more. And I think that was the blueprint. It was never the exception. Gaza was never about Gaza or about the Palestinians only. We've seen it in Ireland, erasing the language, erasing the culture, erasing anything that goes beyond what the colonizers intended to be, almost never existed. And it really rubs me the wrong way, because everyone talks about us in such angelic way. And I know few people who are not. And I'm like, that's so harmful.
They didn't all go to the convent.
We have assholes too. Like, you know, we exist in every shape and form, and we're not all generous, and we don't all want to feed you. Like, some of us are bad cooks.
You're not.
Sure, but that's beyond the point, right? Like, it's the fact that we're such a monolith in the people's understanding of what Palestinians are. And unfortunately, sometimes our life lead us, like my daughter got injured, so everyone thinks that we all like suffered in the same way. And I just don't see it that way. And it almost becomes more of a gap between the people who are trying to understand, trying to help you, but don't see you as a full human. Unintentionally, of course. Which makes it harder, because then you can't hate on them. They're not full assholes. But you want to so much, because, I mean, we're dysfunctional. My family are so dysfunctional that I can talk about it for years. And it can be a great example for Palestinians.
There you go, and a great lesson for the rest of us.
Yes.
Tell us a little bit more about, maybe not the convent, but let's talk about the other kind of church that your family was involved in, I guess, which is the left. You, maybe not your immediate family, but you have close relatives who are part of a very long tradition of the left in Gaza that, again, not necessarily everybody is aware of.
Yeah, my family are all over the place. So we are Muslims, but like originally we come from Jewish descent, which again, it's very common in Palestine. It's very, very common to have your roots extending to Jewish, Christian, Muslim families. And my family are so wealthy, it makes me mad, because I don't know any of that wealth. Like, it was years and years ago, and so when you Google the name, they're like, oh, those are business. And I'm like, no, they're not. I'm getting nothing but debts. But they're also very, very not shy, politically speaking. So we had a lot of, and that's the branch I come from, a lot of secular and a lot of Popular Front, which is communist party. And so we almost wanted to explore every possible way that can free us. And we were like, okay, maybe don't be religious, maybe be more religious, maybe go to the church. So we were raised in so many different ways, and it's almost like everyone just gather at the end of the day, tell me, what do you know? What do you know that I don't know? So that made my understanding of us so broad and so deep at the same time. Like, I grew up in a convent school, but I have my cousins who are so religious, and I have other cousins who are so secular, and all were active in different ways with like the path to liberation as much as we know. I think it was very exciting to see that growing up, but it was also very sad, because as Palestinians, we're conditioned to think that the world just doesn't know. But if they know, this would not be our reality. Like if they know how we suffer in Palestine or in Gaza specifically, but more so how we've been colonized and we've been robbed from our human rights, that's the only issue. And as we see during this genocide, lack of information is not the problem. It's a televised genocide. It's not what people didn't know or what we didn't do. But we can talk about their bad parts too, if you want.
There's just talking about, reminding me about the genocide and the way that the genocide began to be in our consciousness here makes me think that we're seeing some of that again now. Do you remember early on when the Israelis hit the hospital and we had weeks of forensic analysis about, obviously this wasn't done deliberately and there has to be...
OSINT guys.
Yeah, all the OSINT guys, and there were lots of theories about stray rockets and things like that. And we've had something similar in Iran about the day one attack on the girls' school with the somehow at the very worst it was a mistake. But that, again, there had to be some explanation. It wasn't the obvious one that the country that's bombing the hell out of this country bombed the hell out of a girls' school. And what we see now, though, as the weeks go on, is, oh yeah, they're hitting a civilian infrastructure. Oh, they're of course they are. Of course they are. That's what you do when you're destroying a society. And the program, as in Palestine, is to destroy a society. I want to come back, Eman, to the podcast that you're working on yourself, though, because if you're talking about Palestinian diversity, and we use this diversity word as a kind of a catch-all often, but it's a very interesting podcast you're doing. Tell us about Baina. I think that's how you say it. Baina, sorry. It's about okay. Baina, the podcast, and you're on episode 3
we are.
As well. Your episode 3 just came out, and this is episode 3 of the Party
Jinx.
Jinx, yeah. So tell us about your podcast.
So as a Palestinian society, it's not only that people didn't know enough about us, it's also that we, by design, didn't know enough about each other. So like the West Bank and Gaza are so separated, our lifestyles are so different, our culture varies, and our cooking, we're better, is much... it's so much broader than what people summarize in Palestinian category. So Baina is a very, very chill kind of podcast that we decided to do to reduce our stress in explaining to the world what we are, who we are, what we do, and like auditioning in so many ways, because we're so sick of trying to audition. And it's between me and my dear friend Rand, who's from the West Bank. I'm from Gaza, and she's from Nablus in the West Bank, in occupied Palestine. And Rand belongs to the queer society of Palestinians. So there's a kind of a disconnect between our dysfunctional, backward traditions in some parts and our more liberal parts of us. And I think there is definitely a sense of homophobia that still exists. And I don't know a single people that ever been nice to gay people, but like let's go and tell the people that we're not all mean, but at the same time we also have a queer society that we need to embrace, we need to love, and we need to be proud of. And that's literally what the podcast is, not just to say, oh look, we love each other, but also like, why don't we love each other all the time? What's so dysfunctional about it, the way that we think of each other? And Rand, who we joke that she represents all the Palestinian queers ever existed, walk us through that, while we also joke about the things that sometimes even Zionist propaganda weaponize against us and contribute into the pink washing. And we take it with a lot of humor, because if we don't, we're gonna die, really, and we just laugh about it. And so in the podcast, it's not a professional podcast by any means, it's just us kind of parading all the crap that we want the world to know about us, good and bad. And we call it podcast because we discuss food quite a lot. And we
There's
also...
a recipe on every
Yes.
page, yes. Yeah.
There's a recipe at the end of every episode, and we tell people exactly how to cook it, so they wouldn't put chocolate and hummus and all that. and we say it, I think, in a humorous way, while we're like biting our tongue. Like, sure, you can cook, just don't fuck it up. Just do it this way.
There's our explicit mark.
Yes. And we do make few jokes about weed, but that's our moms never understand it, so we're good.
Honest to God, it really is really good crack, the podcast. It is a great listen. The two of you you obviously do
We're
love
funny.
each other very much.
Yeah, we
You're
love
very
each
funny.
other. That's true.
And
Till we
the
don't.
conversation just really flows like, it doesn't look like anybody's checking their script like Harry Browne over here. It really, you're just fantastic.
You have no idea how much editing we do, just FYI.
Yeah. I really love presumably a lot of cutting room floor, right?
We're just like, okay, this will get us canceled. Just take it out. They're not ready for this.
Yeah, we have a little bit of that as well.
No.
We do have a live audience here as well, so they'll know if we're doing anything that.
You're so special.
Yeah, it's great to be here in the Whistleblower. The light coming in from the red brick across the road in South Ann Street, the sound of our friends in the room instead of the soundproof that we have down in the downstairs bunker. I want to ask you one last question here, and maybe it's a kind of a touchy subject, but I think, look, we've already done Fintan O'Toole, so let's do anti-Semitism, right? Let's do the... on your podcast, there's great conversations that touch on the anti-Semitism question. And you talked about the way that kind of queer life in Palestine is often used to caricature, Muslim bigotry. But can you talk a little bit about how it is that you guys see and understand anti-Semitism, and also here in Ireland, because we've been hearing a lot of it lately about that the special anti-Semitism of Ireland.
And we're, like, just to correct, we're also discussing all of Palestinians' homophobic views. Like, we're not discussing Muslim ones only, because the Zionist propaganda is so focused on showing the world that we're only Muslims, and we're not. We're not. And so we're like, okay, homophobic, true, but not just Muslims, everyone. And I think it's important because, again, I'm not excusing it, but it's just people in the West act like everyone was so nice to their queer communities. They had all the rights, and we're like the odd one out, and we're like, we're just marrying you guys. Like, we're taking you as an example. But more so, it's the fact that when people talk about Zionist propaganda, or when they talk about Israeli society, they talk about it with such a shy manner that it's almost like it's not a Jewish supremacy ideology that fuels Zionism and therefore fuels anti-Semitism around the world. And it's as if it's not, the responsibility does not fall on the entire Jewish community everywhere to speak against it, because if you're not aligned with it, then that's the same principles that we were held by as Muslims everywhere. Every time ISIS, every time Al-Qaeda, they flinch, and we have to come out with statements condemning that. And I know that it's dehumanizing, but it's different when you have a Jewish state that says that any Jewish around the world can come, own property, own land, have a passport, and as long as you're Jewish. And then you say, well, no, it's not connected to me. Yes, it is. Whether we like it or not, it's the role of defending Judaism should come from the Jewish society. And on the podcast, we discuss how shy the world is about that, and how much that also fuels anti-Semitism, because then we're not letting the Jewish society speak up, and we're acting like we don't want to hear from them, because it's not something that falls on them, but it is. They are being weaponized and used against their will most of the time. But at the same time, we're also having Israeli society with statistics that goes up to 80% of support to genocide. And so it's important to hear from the Jewish society. It's very important to also understand, and we heard those from Jewish voices, where you need to speak up. Otherwise, it's a permission. Silence can be violence, and this is what we're seeing in this case. And I think in America, specifically in the U.S., there's a lot of tape and red tape around what we say about Israel, but there isn't even any kind of platforming for organizations like Jewish Voice for Peace, if not now, which I'm not a fan of. However, they do exist, and we need to hear what they have to say. And so we continuously extend the invitation to either speak up, or this Jewish supremacist ideology is going to keep on moving forward.
Great. Thanks, Eman. So look, it would be great to do a questions and answers session now, but we're not equipped for it. So the questions and answers is going to happen over a glass of wine, maybe a cookie, some tea, and I hope that you've enjoyed it here in the room, and the audience out there as well. And particularly big thanks to Eoghan McNeill and to Eman Mohammed. Thank you. Round of applause. And we'll call it a podcast. Yes. Thanks. Bye-bye now.